My son stopped speaking to me 22 years ago. I wasn't invited to his wedding. I've never held my grandchildren. When my husband died, he didn't come to the funeral. He never told me why. For 22 years, I believed I'd done something unforgivable. I searched my memory for the moment I broke us. I replayed every argument, every harsh word, every time I chose work over him. I never found it. The phone calls became shorter. Then they stopped altogether. Birthday cards I sent came back unopened. Christmas invitations went unanswered. I watched from the edge of his life as he got married, had children, built a career. I learned about these milestones through other people, neighbors, distant relatives, anyone but him. I was 61 when the silence began. I am 83 now. For 22 years, I carried a weight I couldn't name. It pressed against my chest when I woke up. It sat beside me at dinner. It followed me through empty rooms that once held his laughter. The first year was the hardest. Every time the phone rang, my heart would jump. I'd rush to answer it, already composing what I'd say, how I'd fix whatever had gone wrong. It was never him, telemarketers, wrong numbers, my sister checking in with that careful voice people use when they're worried about you. I remembered the time he was 7 and broke his arm. I'd been at work. I didn't arrive at the hospital until 2 hours later. He'd said it was okay, that he understood. But maybe it wasn't okay. The holidays were the hardest. I'd set the table for one, imagining what it would be like if he walked through the door. Sometimes I'd cook his favorite meal anyway. I'd eat alone, the empty chair across from me, louder than any words. I saw him once at a grocery store about 7 years in. He was pushing a cart with a little girl in the seat. She had his eyes, my granddaughter. I froze in the cereal aisle. She was wearing a yellow dress, her hair in 2 ponytails. She was laughing, her small hands clapping. I wanted to walk over. I wanted to tell her I was her grandmother, but my feet wouldn't move. He saw me. Our eyes met for 3 seconds. Then he turned the cart around and walked away. She never knew I was standing there. She never knew she'd just passed the woman who'd spent 7 years aching to meet her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the boxes, trying not to cry in public. An employee asked if I needed help. I said no. I abandoned my cart and walked out. I sat in the parking lot for an hour, watching people come and go. Something broke in me that day that never quite healed. I stopped going to family gatherings. It was easier than watching everyone pretend I didn't exist. The silence became a third presence in my life. It had weight. Some days it felt like grief, other days like shame. I started writing him letters I never sent. Long, rambling letters where I apologized for everything I could think of. I'm sorry I worked too much. I'm sorry I wasn't patient enough. I'm sorry I didn't understand you better. I'm sorry I wasn't the mother you needed. I kept them in a drawer beside my bed. 47 letters over the years. None of them mailed. Sometimes I'd take them out and read them. The paper would feel thin and fragile in my hands. My handwriting had changed over the years. Shakier now, less certain. I never sent them because I didn't know if he'd even open them, and I couldn't bear the thought of them coming back unopened, like all the birthday cards. People tried to comfort me. They'd say he'd come around eventually. But years passed, and nothing changed. I learned to live with it the way you learn to live with chronic pain. You adjust. You stop expecting relief. When my husband died 8 years ago, I called to tell him. A woman answered. His wife, I assumed. I gave her the message. She said she was sorry for my loss. I never heard back from him. He didn't come to the funeral. The funeral was small. My sister and her family, a few neighbors, people from my husband's work. The church was half empty, which felt fitting somehow. My husband had been a quiet man. I sat in the front pew alone, surrounded by people who offered condolences. The pastor spoke about love and loss. I heard none of it. All I could think was, my son should be here. His father is being buried, and he's not here. After the service, people came back to my house. They brought casseroles and sympathy cards. They stood in small groups in my living room, speaking in hushed voices. Someone asked where my son was. I said he couldn't make it. Work obligations. They nodded and changed the subject quickly. I found myself in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need to be washed, just to have something to do with my hands. My sister found me there. She put her hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only kindness that fits. That was the moment I stopped hoping. I decided he must have his reasons. I decided to let him go. Not because I wanted to, but because holding on was breaking me. I sold the house 2 years ago. Too many memories. Too many rooms that echoed with absence. I moved into a small assisted living apartment with white walls and a single window that faced a courtyard. The house had been ours for 38 years. I'd raised my son there. I'd buried my husband from there. Every room held a ghost of someone I'd lost. I hired people to pack everything. I couldn't do it myself. I'd start sorting through closets and find myself sitting on the floor at 2 a.m, holding a small wooden car my son had played with when he was 4. One of them asked if I was excited about the new place. I said yes. It was easier than the truth. I brought almost nothing with me. A few photographs, some books, the letters I never sent. Everything else went to charity or to the dump. Furniture we'd chosen together, dishes I'd served holiday meals on, the rocking chair I'd used when my son was a baby. I kept one photograph, my son at age 8, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish he'd caught on our one and only camping trip. I put that photograph on the windowsill in my new apartment. Some days I looked at it. Some days I turned it face down. My days became routine. Breakfast at 8, a walk if the weather was nice, lunch with the other residents, dinner at 6, bed by 9. Other residents would talk about their children, their grandchildren, the visits they had coming up. I'd smile and nod and say mine were busy. It was easier than explaining. It was a quiet life, a small life, but it was mine. I'd sit there with my coffee and watch the sun come up. Sometimes I'd think about all the years that had passed, all the birthdays I'd missed, 22 years of milestones that happened without me. I wondered if my grandchildren knew about me, if they'd ever asked where Grandma was, what he'd told them. I wondered if he thought about me at all, if he ever picked up the phone and got halfway through dialing before hanging up. I stopped wondering what I'd done wrong. I made peace with the fact that some questions don't have answers. Then, 3 months ago, I had a fall in my apartment. The staff insisted I go to the hospital. I'd been reaching for a book on a high shelf. My balance wasn't what it used to be. One moment I was standing. The next I was on the floor. Pain shooting through my hip. They ran tests. They asked questions. They filled out forms. One of the nurses brought me a clipboard with old medical records attached. She needed me to verify some information. I was flipping through the pages, half paying attention, when I saw his name. Not on my paperwork, on a consent form dated 23 years ago. My son's signature, his handwriting unmistakable even after all this time. The form was for a kidney donation. My kidney, to a stranger. I stared at it, my hands shaking. I didn't remember any of this. But there it was, his signature, consent given on my behalf. I asked the nurse what it meant. She pulled up older records and explained it carefully. 23 years ago, I'd been in a car accident. Severe internal injuries. I needed a kidney transplant. I'd been unconscious. My son had made the decision. The donor had been a young woman, 24 years old. A match. She died 2 days after the surgery. Complications. I felt the room tilt. My son had signed the papers. My son had chosen to save my life. And the donor, the person whose kidney was keeping me alive, had died because of that choice. He hadn't abandoned me because he hated me. He'd left because he couldn't look at me without seeing her. The woman who died so I could live. A stranger who became a ghost between us. He'd carried that guilt alone for 22 years. A young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Someone's daughter. She'd been 24 years old, the same age he was when he made the choice. The nurse had shown me her name, Jessica. I didn't cry. I just sat there staring at the form, feeling something crack open inside me. 22 years of silence suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. Every unreturned call, every unopened birthday card. They weren't punishments, they were survival. My son had saved my life by choosing to end someone else's, and he'd been carrying that weight every single day since. The nurse asked if I was okay. I nodded. I wasn't. I went home that evening with the form folded in my purse. My hands were still shaking, but I understood now. An understanding felt like a kind of ending, not the one I'd hoped for, but an ending nonetheless. I thought about the young woman whose kidney I carried. I thought about her family. I thought about the choice my son had made. And I realized something I'd never let myself believe before. Some silences aren't punishments. Some silences are just people trying to survive their own grief. I still don't know if I'll ever speak to him again. But I know this: he saved my life. And it broke him. And I spent 22 years hating myself for a reason that never existed. Last week, I took out all 47 letters I'd written over the years. I read them one by one. Then I burned them in the small fireplace in my apartment. The first letter was dated 2 months after the silence began. So hopeful, so certain I could fix whatever I'd broken. I'm sorry I missed your school play. I'm sorry I worked too much. All those apologies for things that didn't matter. I watched the paper curl and blacken. The smoke detector went off. I opened all the windows. When the last letter was gone, I sat on the floor feeling lighter than I had in decades. I don't need to apologize anymore. I just need to let him know I understand. So I'm writing him one more letter. Not an apology, not a plea, just the truth. I started it this morning. My hands were steadier than they'd been in years. I didn't write about the accident or the hospital form. I didn't explain what I'd learned. I just wrote, I understand now, and if you need the distance, I can live with that. I'm alive because of a choice he made when he was too young to carry the weight of it. He was 24 when he signed that form, the same age as the woman whose kidney I carry. I don't know if he'll read it. I don't know if it will change anything, but I'm sending it anyway, because after 22 years of silence, maybe it's time for one of us to speak first. I addressed the envelope last night. It's sitting on my kitchen table now, waiting to be mailed. Some mornings I look at it and think about all the other letters I wrote, all the words I never sent, all the years I spent believing I was the one who'd failed. And I realize that maybe neither of us failed. Maybe we both just loved in ways that hurt more than we knew how to heal. Tomorrow, I'll walk to the mailbox at the end of the courtyard. I'll slide the envelope through the slot. I'll hear it drop inside, and then I'll let it go. Not the hope of hearing back, not the memory of who we were, not even the grief of who we might have been. Just the weight, just the blame, just the 22 years of thinking I should have done something differently. Because the truth is, I couldn't have changed this, and neither could he. We were both just trying to survive the same terrible moment, in different ways, for different reasons. Him with the memory of signing a form, me with the absence of knowing why. Both of us carrying Jessica's ghost, and maybe that's enough. I'll mail the letter tomorrow, and then I'll come back to my apartment, I'll make my coffee, I'll sit by the window, I'll watch the sun come up over the courtyard, the way I do every morning, and I'll keep living. Not waiting, not hoping, just living. One day at a time,